All right, let's dive into something that might seem a little counterintuitive. We're looking at a really fascinating economic paper today that connects two things you might not think are related: the crazy housing market and why fewer young people are getting married. Let's get into it. So, here's the puzzle, right? You'd think that with how expensive it is to live alone, more people would be teaming up, getting married to share the rent. It just makes sense. But that's not what's happening at all. In fact, the data shows the complete opposite. And this paper, well, it has a really interesting explanation for why that is. Okay, so to really get to the bottom of this, we've got to look at three huge trends that have been reshaping American society for the last, 40 years or so.
Okay, first up, take a look at this. This chart really shows you just how big this shift has been. Back in 1980, more than 70% of adults were married. Fast forward to 2019, and that number has just plummeted. And you can see it really clearly in that red line. It's been an even steeper drop for folks without a college degree. Even when you add in couples who are just living together, the trend is still pointing straight down.
All right, trend number 2. This is where it gets even more interesting. So while marriage rates are going down, the number of young adults living with their parents is, well, it's just skyrocketing. This chart here shows the percentage of 23 to 29-year-olds living back at home. And just look at that dashed red line. That's men without a college degree. Their rate has shot up from around 20% to over 35%. I mean, that is a massive change in how people are living. And now for trend number 3, which is basically the economic pressure cooker behind all of this. That solid red line, that shows the ratio of house prices to what people actually earn. It's jumped from about 3.5 to 4.5. And at the same time, that dashed green line shows the percentage of renters who are rent-burdened, meaning they're spending over 30% of their income just on rent. That number's gone from 30% to almost 45%. The bottom line is, housing has gotten way, way less affordable.
So here's the thing that really ties all this together. This isn't happening to everyone equally. The paper really hammers this point home. For every single one of these trends, less marriage, more living with parents, the crazy housing costs, the hit is way bigger for adults who don't have a college degree. This education gap, it's absolutely central to the whole puzzle.
Okay, so we've got the pieces on the board. Marriage rates are down, living with parents is way up, and housing costs are through the roof. So, how do they all connect? This is where the paper's core idea really shines.
Okay, just a quick vocabulary check so we're all on the same page. You're going to hear the term parental co-residence. It sounds fancy, but all it means is an adult kid living at home with their parents. It's basically the main alternative to getting your own place.
And this right here, this is the core conflict. High house prices are basically pulling young adults in two completely opposite directions. On one hand, yeah, it makes sense to get married to split the bills and get what economists call economies of scale. But on the other hand, there's an even better deal financially. Just live with your parents and pay zero in housing costs. It's a real trade-off.
So let's walk through how this plays out, step by step. First, the sticker shock of rent or a mortgage hits you, and you have to make a choice. Option A, find a partner and split the cost. Option B, move back home. Now, for more and more people, especially those with lower incomes, living with parents is just the smarter financial move. But here's the real kicker. The moment you choose to live at home, you've pretty much taken yourself out of what economists call the marriage market, and that shrinks the pool of available partners for everybody else.
And this chart, this shows that whole dynamic perfectly. It's a simulation from the paper's model. So as house prices, that's the x-axis, start to rise, you see the marriage rate on the y-axis actually tick up just a little bit. That's that let's split the rent effect. But then you hit a tipping point. And at that point, the financial benefit of living at home becomes so huge, so overwhelming, that the marriage rate just tanks.
Okay, so the theory sounds really solid, right? But the big question is, how much of the real-world drop in marriage can it actually explain? Well, the researchers built a whole quantitative model to find out. And the number they came up with is pretty staggering. After running all the simulations, from 1980 all the way to today, the model estimates that rising house prices alone can explain about 30% of the total decline in marriage. I mean, think about that. That is a huge chunk of a massive social trend, all tied back to this one economic factor. And hey, this isn't just some back-of-the-napkin calculation. This is the main finding pulled right from the paper's abstract. The author says, I find that house prices explain around 30% of the decline in marriage. And what's more, the model also nails the fact that the drop was way bigger for the non-college educated, which is exactly what we saw in the real-world data.
So if soaring housing costs are a big part of the problem, it naturally leads to another really interesting question. Could housing policy be part of the solution? Could you actually use it to reverse the trend? The paper looks at a couple of possibilities.
Okay, so they ran a couple of policy simulations. First, what if you gave everyone a 10% rental subsidy? Well, that would get about 3.3% more people to move out of their parents' house, and it would nudge the marriage rate up by 1.5%. Then they looked at down payment assistance. That also gets people to move out and boosts marriage a bit, but there's a catch. It might just be encouraging people to get married sooner, not necessarily increasing the total number of people who ever get married.
So what are the big takeaways from these little experiments? Well, for one, it shows that even small financial nudges can have a real impact on huge life decisions like who you marry and when. Second, it seems like making rent cheaper is a more direct way to boost the overall marriage rate, simply by getting more people out on their own and into that marriage market. And third, it brings up a really subtle but important point for policymakers. Are you trying to change the timing of when people get married or the total number of people who do?
And that really leaves us with a powerful final thought. What this research shows is a clear, numerical link between the housing market and the marriage market. It basically means that when politicians are debating housing affordability, they are also, whether they know it or not, making marriage policy. And that forces us to ask a much bigger question. What exactly are we trying to achieve, and are we sure we're pulling the right levers?